listening and putting some information. In addition to that, there's a lot of blank space around your notes where you'll also be able to jot down some more information based on what you hear. I will be giving some analogies, or you may think of your own analogy that will help you remember the process so that you can go ahead and jot that down. So this is where you take notes. Is this yours? Oh, this is where you will take notes for that. Your homework, you do not have any. And so let's go ahead and get started. Give me a second while I pull up the presentation. All right. So we are talking about DNA replication. And this is what you actually have on your sheet for your notes. But when you look at the picture, what is involved? First of all, what does replication mean? The copy. Okay. Now raise your hand and tell me, why do you think we are talking about DNA replication or copying DNA? Emmanuel.
Because our cells always
Our cells duplicate. Why do our cells duplicate? To repair, grow, and replace. And with that being said, why are we talking about DNA replication? DNA has to copy itself in order for the cell to duplicate. Why does DNA have to copy itself? Our cells are supposed to be exactly the same, and why is DNA so important? Because it's the makeup of us. It has the genetic information. It tells the cell what it is. Because we have several different types of cells. It's going to tell the cell if you're a nerve cell, if you're a blood cell. You don't want a blood cell to copy itself to become now a brain cell. But it doesn't have the proper genetic information to be a brain cell, so it's working a job that it doesn't know what to do. That's like you being hired for a job that you've never been trained for. So today they send you in here and they say, you're no longer the student, now you're the teacher, and it's your responsibility that everybody passes this class. And you're like, oh crap, I never did this before, and I don't have any training. Yes?
I have a question about DNA. So like the DNA in your kid?
It's in everything. Everything. Which is why when you watch investigative movies, they try to get someone to drink a soda so they can get the DNA off of it from their saliva. All right. So, with this being said, then looking at this picture, it has a bunch of words. Yesterday you took a video test that you saw some of these words in it. Now today it's going to make sense. This is where I'm going to be asking you to help give me some information based on some of the things that you heard and you saw yesterday. So what are some of the highlighted words that are on here? Transcription and translation. What does transcription mean? To write, to transcribe, to write. It also means to write a copy of. All right, what does translation mean? Don't tell me translate.
To change.
Not change. I want to use a word that starts with I. Say it louder. Interpret. Translation means to interpret. If one thing was in one language and you needed to be translated, that means you needed to be interpreted or put into a language that you better understand. So DNA replication involves two things, what?
Transcription and translation.
Transcription and translation in order to do what? Copy the DNA. But what's the goal of the cell? We talked about this. What's the goal? Do what? Make protein. So what does that cause to making a protein? It's called protein synthesis. So DNA replicates itself, but in replicating itself, it has to still do the job of the cell, which is to make protein. So the process that DNA goes through to replicate itself, it uses what? Transcription plus translation, and that's going to equal what? Protein synthesis. There's the equation. DNA replication is transcription plus translation is going to give us protein synthesis. You want to make sure you have that. Everyone good?
No.
Now, when you look at this picture, it looks kind of complicated, but once you kind of break it down, it really does make sense. So this picture is the overall process of DNA replication, but we are going to break it down and then build it back up so we understand it a little bit better. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, I'm moving. So then your next picture is here. Here we have the cell, which is the control center. It is where, I'm sorry, the cell is, here we have a whole cell, but we have a control center, which is in the cell. What is the control center? The nucleus. Inside the nucleus, when you look and you break it down, because here we have the cell, inside is the control center, which is the nucleus, which is the brain of the cell. We already learned and talked about that. But when we look even deeper inside the cell, we have these things that are specific to us, but we get them from our parents. We get 23 from our mom and 23 from our dad. These are called chromosomes, so which contains chromosomes. They look like these little X's that we have here, and when DNA replicates, they split in half, and they duplicate themselves, but they're made up of strands of DNA. And although DNA is very complicated, it is quite simple when you think about it, because it is made up of just these three things: sugar, phosphate, and base. And we all have it. We all have sugar, we all have phosphate, and we all have these bases that it's made up of. There's only 4 bases that are within DNA, but even with those 4 bases, all of the combinations, there are several different combinations, which makes us all different. Who knows what that project is called that makes us all different because of the several different combinations of DNA? What's that project is called? Why are you trying to guess? Huh? Nope. It starts with a G. Certain type of project. Someone saying it. Yeah, a little bit more words. Thank you, Shania, for getting them notes. It might be on your vocabulary sheet. It could be page 45. No. Now that we're learning a lesson, you should never come into class and have your science things in your book bags unless I say don't take anything out. It should already be on your desk so that you're prepared, because learning requires recall. I'll help you out. It's called the Genome Project. The Genome Project contains the fact that there are several different combinations of DNA, which is the reason why there are several different types of us. Now, the only type that DNA that is identical, which means they would have the same base pairs along with the same sugar phosphate groups made together, would be what? The only type of people, twins. What type of twins? Identical twins. So would Jemiah and Shemaiah have the same DNA? No, because they are not identical. What about Jaden and Aria? Absolutely not, because they couldn't ever be identical, because one's a boy and one's a girl. What about Mr. Livingston's twins? No, because one's a boy and one's a girl. They can't be identical. They can look alike, but they can't be identical. Question, Terry. Okay, so again, DNA is a nucleotide. DNA is a nucleic acid. Why is it a nucleic acid? Why is DNA a nucleic acid? Nope. Well, a portion of it is because the nucleus, but the more obvious reason. What is its name? Deoxyribonucleic acid. It tells us right in its name, it's a nucleic acid. All right, so in the picture to the right with the little blue thing and the little yellow thing in the middle, when you look closer to that picture, I can't see from here, you will realize that it says it's growing protein. It has something called tRNA, but this thing is made in the nucleus and it's responsible for making proteins. What is responsible for making protein? Nope. What? Ribosomes. And ribosomes are made in the nucleus. And then they float around on the cell. They're also located where in the cell? Rough ER. That's what makes it rough. Any questions about this? All right, so now we went ahead and we saw the big picture of the DNA replication. We went down and we now looking at the cell. We broke the cell apart to realize that the cell is made of this DNA and these ribosomes are responsible for making the protein. So now we have to look and see how do the ribosomes make this protein in the process of DNA replication. So we go and we look in the ribosomes. Now from yesterday, your video, the ribosomes have these links together. These links are these bases. You have the adenine always goes with thymine. Thymine always goes with adenine. Guanine always goes with cytosine. And cytosine always goes with. They can never switch up. But on here we have some things these use. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But before we do that, when we look at number one is showing us that we have these three bases. The three bases would be AAA. And those three bases code for one specific thing. Who remembers from yesterday's video, three bases codes for a amino acid. Amino acids are very important because they are going to determine the strength of our hair. They're going to determine the acidity of our saliva or the basicness of our saliva, the strongness of our bones, our skin, all of these types of things. And that's very important that our base pairs link up properly so that we can have the proper determination of our characteristics of what we are to be, what we are to look like, how we are to act, how we are to sound, different things of that nature. What was one of the amino acids that you saw in yesterday's video that you had to write down? One was responsible for doing something in the liver. What was it? Huh? No, I don't know. What was it responsible for doing in the liver? Was responsible for breaking down toxins. So that lets me know you were just watching the video and writing down your stuff, listening to lists, or reading your notes. You have a special amino acid in your body that when you take Tylenol, remember, Tylenol could actually damage your liver if you took too much. So that amino acid is responsible for breaking down that toxin so that the Tylenol doesn't damage. Because we all take Tylenol, we're all taking it before for a headache, correct? But we don't want to take it and it hurts us, so our body helps us with that. The fact that our body jumps in and does that for us without us having to tell it to do so is called what? Very good. All right, so this picture, the first card is showing us that three bases, and particularly it's pointing to the AAA, the GCG, the CCA, and the UGU, but three bases codes for one amino acid. Now when you look at number two, it's showing you that all of these amino acids together is going to code for one. What's the goal of the ribosome? Protein. And this is how the ribosomes make protein. Inside the nucleus is the ribosomes where the DNA is located. The DNA has the bases. Three of the bases of the DNA code for one amino acid. Those amino acids are all strung together like a string, and that's going to code for one protein. It's a string of them, a long string of them. So this lets you know that our DNA is very, very, very long, located in that little small cell that you can't even see. Got it? All right. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead through our process of DNA replication. Now, when you're thinking about this, let's think about, we got a little cough, or you don't feel well, you got a little cut, or something's not right, maybe your throat is hurting, and you got to go to the doctors. When you go into the doctor's office, who's the first person that comes in first? The nurse. You don't see the doctor yet, and sometimes you might not even see the doctor. The nurse may talk to the doctor and give them information, and then the nurse comes back in and tells you what the doctor said. The doctor may come in for a second, or a nurse practitioner. So let's think about it this way. All right, so first off, for the first portion of the DNA replication, the enzymes are going to make a copy of the one strand of DNA. Making a copy of it is called what? Remember the two things, transcription. Remember writing, copying it out. This is called transcription. This will be where the DNA is going to break. Remember, it's a double helix. It's going to break apart so it can make a copy. Now, this will be like your nurse coming in and getting information from you, and she's copying down what you said. All right? So if you can remember that, you might want to jot that down for this portion. You go in and say, oh, what seems to be the problem? Oh, my head hurts. I felt a little warm. I kind of threw up today. I just haven't been feeling like myself. She's like, what did you do all day? Well, I went to a basketball game. I drank some soda, and I was around people, and all sorts of stuff. She's writing all of this stuff down. What color was your vomit? Have you been sleeping more than time? She's jotting all these things down that she's asking. She takes your temperature, she weighs you, she looks at your ears, and she writes down all the information that you're telling her, right? She's transcribing. What is a single strand of the DNA once the DNA comes apart? That single strand, what is it called? It no longer contains it only contains the sugar ribose, RNA. Again, nurse, RN, registered nurse. That's the way to how you help to remember this. All right, the doctor will probably come in and look at you and ask you a couple questions, and the doctor say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and talk to the nurse. She then comes back and brings what? They don't give you any medicine at the doctor's office. They give you what instead? They'll give you a shot if you got a little cold or whatever. What? A prescription. So she comes in and she gives you some information from the doctor. So here is where she's delivering the message. So now the RNA, the registered nurse, is not just playing the role of a nurse, she's also now playing the role of a messenger. What is the messenger RNA called? Messenger RNA or mRNA. So RNA is now changed to mRNA. So if you look at this picture, you will notice that no longer does it have just the A, T, C, and the G. It also throws in a letter U. Who remembers what that base was called? Uracil. URACIL. Because again, RNA is going to be a copy of it, but it's been transcribed. Now, when you think of it, when you told the nurse what's happened, she didn't write down exactly what you said. She jotted down some notes based on what you said, correct? She gives that information to the doctor comes in, he looks at you, he checks you, he goes back to the nurse, he gives her some information, she comes back as the messenger and says, okay, here the doctor's giving you a prescription. How many times have you looked at the prescription of the doctor's handwriting and can you read it? Or understand what it says? No, right? So DNA cannot specifically read the coding from the mRNA because A doesn't match with U. It matches with what? T. A matches with T, correct? So this now has to be what? The information that the mRNA has delivered has to be what? What's the last process? It has to be translated. And where do you go to translate your prescription? To the pharmacist. So the final process is you taking your prescription to the pharmacist, they making sense of it, and they giving you your product, which is the medicine. So here you have to transport yourself or transfer yourself to the pharmacist, give them your prescription, they're going to make sense of it, they're going to translate it, and they're going to give you your product. What's the product in this all? What's the final product? What do they want to make? Protein. In order to do that, this information has to be translated. So what translates it? Remember, the messenger DNA gives it to you. You now have to transport yourself. So now it's called tRNA, transport RNA. So now going to take something like UCG, and it's going to recode it to now be, the U will no longer be a U, but now a T. It's going to code it to 3 bases. Those 3 bases are now understood to be one what? Amino acid. Once it translates all of those bases, it's going to create a strand of protein, and the process is complete called, what do they make? What's the product? Protein synthesis. So I broke it down to build it right back up. Any questions about this? All right, then let's do a little bit of quiz work, looking up here, using your notes to interpret some things. Look at this information up here, and I want you to tell me in your own words, take a moment and look through it, tell me what's going on. Just analyze it for a moment. All right, what's going on? In the process of DNA replication, what is this? Transcription, why? It's copying the sequence down. If you see here, it's taking this piece, it's splitting it apart, and it's copying down the sequence here. You have A, G, C, but it changes the T to U because remember, the nurse is not copying exactly what you said, but it's still going to be enough information for you to get what you need. And then it's going to have to recode it. Got that? Okay, so what's happening here? What is this describing? This is past information. This is your genetic code. This is how your DNA is made up. C to G, G to C, DNA simplicity. That's your double helix. If you look at the picture, you see all your coding. And it goes on and on and on. All right, what about here? What's this? Say it louder. This is your translation so that it can complete the final process, which is protein synthesis. All right, DNA to RNA is called what? Right on your notes in the little corner or somewhere on the bottom, you got a little space. Just write down your answer, just see if you get it right. You don't need to write down the words, just to double check and see if you got it right. You'll cross it off later, but this is just your little guide to see if you can get these answers right. Raise your hand if you say that it's replication. Raise your hand if you say that it's transcription. Don't be shy. Raise your hand if you say that it's translation. How about protein synthesis? It is translation. All right. RNA to protein. Raise your hand if you say replication. Transcription. Translation. Protein synthesis. Protein synthesis it is. Proteins are synthesized. Raise your hand if you say at the mitochondria, at the nucleus, at the ribosome, at the chloroplast. This is not right. That circle should be at ribosome. I don't know how it got there. All right. Again, this should be ribosome, not chloroplast. I don't know how the circle got moved down. All right. What's going on here? Malcolm, what's going on here?
We got cell. Um. Uh.
Read the words.
Yeah, I'm reading. So, translation. So what's happening? Making protein.
And what's happening in the process? Who else sees it clearly? It's they.
They break.
Transcription, translation, protein synthesis. All of it's going on. It's the entire DNA replication. All right, so here's just the process being broke down. The DNA to RNA, then RNA becomes proteins. Protein synthesis is all controlled by the genes. The fact that we make these proteins, we do it in the way that our genes tell us to do so because our genes are who we are and what makes us us. So you have your notes for this. Are there any questions about today's notes? All righty then.